Hi, my name is Sarah Houde. Welcome to my clay studio. I've been working in my studio here in Hollywood, Maryland for the last 30 years. It's amazing how time flies when you're having fun. I started out to be a marine biologist in college, and my very last semester in college I took a clay class and I got completely hooked, and I finally figured out why I was born with big hands, because immediately I could create things on the wheel where it took other students like a lot longer to get the even centering or throwing or any of it down. So lucky for me. And then when I graduated from college, I took a job as a marine biologist in Delaware, working for an environmental consulting company, and I found a clay studio, and gosh, I was there 5 nights a week for a couple years until I moved to Maryland. And I had a couple years without clay work while I was working on my master's. And then I stumbled across a used wheel and kiln, and I finished up my master's, and the first thing I did after that was take a summer-long course at the Corcoran, and really focusing on the clay work. So that was an interesting education, and I guess my practice and my work has just evolved over time. Because of my background, I decided at some point, I can't remember when, that I was tired of making little blue flowers and that I was going to go whole fish into my work. So that by that I mean fish handles and scales and tails, and a lot of fish urns and fish platters and things like that. And oyster platters is something that I've evolved into doing a lot too in the last few years. So it's really been great. I mean, I usually have a list of what I need to do, whether I have orders or shows that I'm getting ready for, or a gallery show, for example, and I will try to create pieces. I work in a series usually, so I might make 4 to 6 or 8 oyster plates at a time. So I've got some over here that are just made and finished, and they're in the drying phase. So every one I do is a little bit different. This one has got little oysters with little pearls. Like, we know that's not real, but it's just kind of fun because I finish them with a mother of pearl glaze, and it makes them really pretty. So this one has oysters. This one's got starfish. So these start out being a thrown piece, and I carve out the oysters and attach some starfish or oysters or seahorses or whatever I'm using. And I kind of sculpt this up into a little bowl. So it's a functional piece. You can use them to serve your oysters. You can put them in the oven carefully, but I would recommend putting them into a cold oven and heating it with the oven. So that's kind of a fun project. I just finished making a batch of mugs, like 12 mugs there. Every one is a little bit different too. Kind of get into making some nautilus or starfish forms. I usually have all sorts of things going. I just fired a bisque kiln at the beginning of the week, so I'd like to show you that, to show you what pieces look like when they've been fired once. So these pieces at this point are greenware. They're made and drying. They're not ready to go in the kiln yet. Probably by Monday they'll be ready to be fired the first time. So each piece is fired a minimum of twice. So there's a bisque firing, then a glaze firing, and then if I'm using some gold or mother of pearl, then that's an additional firing. And that's a low temperature, but the glaze firing is up to 2,240 degrees, which makes it a mid-range stoneware. So it's really functional, very durable. Much more durable than flower pots that are fired to 1,800 degrees. Those are really pretty fragile. So my work is all pretty durable. I'd like to show you where I fire my pieces in an electric kiln. I do the 2 firings out there, and that's in this next room. So I'd like to take you over there and show you that. Okay, so these pieces were fired a couple days ago. They've been bisque fired, and these are some of the pieces that I'll be working on glazing in the next couple days. Probably I'll get to them early next week, but it will take me a whole day. So I've been getting into doing these looping handles, and sometimes I'll put some leaves or floral decorations on them. This one I was kind of thinking of a Jack in the Pulpit. So I kind of made it stripy, so I'll try to glaze it so it looks like that. So I've got a bunch of pieces like that in here. So when people talk about throwing pots, this is the part that they mean about throwing. You take your bowl of clay and throw it onto the wheel head. and you smack it down, and I kind of can slap center it a bit. And the clay is pretty soft, so it should be fairly easy to center. So that's the hardest part for people to learn when they're learning how to make pots. Getting the clay centered so that it's all even. It's always harder to do this when people are watching too. always. So it'll get into line, get all the clay particles lined up pretty quickly. Unless the bat's going to vibrate on me. So it's a matter of pushing down. And pulling it up. See, it's pretty lined up now. It's not bumping and wobbling like it was. It's really hard to make a pot if it's not centered properly. I still am feeling a wobble, but I'm just going to go for it. So I recycle all my clay too. I used to just throw bags and bags of clay shards into the gully, and that was pretty wasteful, so I stopped doing that. Now I recycle everything and re-wedge it up, and I get some exercise in my upper body that way, I guess. Okay, so it's pretty centered. I'm going to just open that up. Of course, I wedge this up, recycle this clay, so it probably has lumps and stuff in it. Usually I have a list of things I'm going to do every time I come into the studio. And so some days I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to be working on berry bowls. Other days I'm working on vases. Other days I am working on platters or oyster plates. I mean, there's any number of things I can be doing. So when you're a potter, you try to keep your production stream going so that you have every week. I usually try to have a load of work that will go into the bisque kiln, and then at the end of the week, after it comes out of the bisque kiln, I'll get it glazed. Meanwhile, I'm still producing a whole other load a week that will get fired the following week. So I try to keep up a pretty good production flow when I'm getting ready for shows. Of course, this year all bets are off because all the shows are canceled. So that makes it difficult to know where the market will be this year. Seems like the online website for the gallery is a pretty good thing. So now I'm just pulling up the pot, pulling up the walls. I want to get it as thin as possible, and I'll be making like a bulbous form, like a vase that's kind of really rounded and inflated looking, with the smallest neck as I can manage. It's important to keep the hands really slippery so that they don't get stuck on the clay and throw things off. So the taller and thinner you get, the slower you go. So usually throwing the pot is the fastest part. Then there's the trimming after it's dried for a while, and then finishing and putting on handles if it's going to have handles, and then you have to let it dry. And then go into the bisque firing, the kiln for the first firing. And then that usually takes about a day for it to fire and cool down again. And then it usually takes a full day or more to do glazing for a load. And that glaze firing takes like 16 hours or so before it's up to temperature, and then it takes like 24 to cool down. So, you know, like really it takes a full week to get a load of stuff done. It's a lot of fun. Throwing is a lot of fun. It just feels really good. So I started with about 3 pounds of clay. I know from experience about how much it takes to do things. Like one of my big platters takes 7 or 8 pounds to get like a 14-inch platter. And then of course everything shrinks. You have to account for the shrinkage. So it looks a little bit bigger now than it'll end up, but shrinkage is 12%. So I have to calculate that if I'm trying to make things fit. I always have to be mindful of that shrinkage. Now I'm just completely smoothing this and doing the final shaping. And I'll just narrow it down. I'm going to narrow the mouth down a little bit more. And then do a little trimming right on the wheel. And then leave it to dry. So I'm trying to get all the water out of the bottom, because that can cause cracking, which you don't ever want in a pot. Maybe I'll do a little, I'm trying to decide which direction. There we go. I'd like to put, sometimes I'd like to put in some make it look a little bit more fluid. I'll go back and define these marks later. Whoop, come back here. One more. I just like the process of making marks on the clay. You know, it makes it interesting. So I'll groove those a little bit deeper when it sets up. And so it'll be even more defined, and I'll give it an interesting foot before cutting it off. There you go. And that's off. Okay. Okay, I'm turning off the gas. Really important to have everything laid out, so I can just do it. So the pot is really hot. It's like glowing molten hot on the inside, and it looks kind of blah right now, but let's see what happens. It should have all sorts of flashes of like purple and red and blue. Okay, and then that is just let it rest for a while. Okay, the big reveal. Let's see if it came out. Oh, got some good colors. Wow, it's like super coppery. It's just really, really coppery. I think it got so hot, it didn't vary a lot. Except for on the bottom, the cooler area there has got a little bit more rainbow effect. You can see it's getting a little bit more rainbowy as it's exposed to the air. So this process, when you put a hot pot into a can like this and cover it, is reduction. So you're using up all the oxygen. The pot is using up all the oxygen in there because it flames, and the flames use the oxygen, and that allows the glaze to turn black, and the glazes with copper and other metals to flash metallic color. So pieces come out different. You never really know what to expect with raku. Every piece, even if you fire two identical pieces in the same glaze and the same firing, and put them in two different pots, they're going to look different. You know, just, you can tell they're the same family, but they're going to have a little variation. So that's that process, which is fun, interesting. So I'll just let it cool off the rest of the way and clean it up. Thanks for coming by and seeing me at my studio today. I'm glad we had a nice day for you to see both inside and outside operations. You can find my work at the North End Gallery on our website right now, and in our physical store when we reopen. So the northendgallery.com, and also my website, sarahhoudepottery.com, and you can call me or email me with special orders as well. So email is selhoude, Houde, @gmail.com.